All right. Hi, everyone. As you come into the room, please remember to scan the QR code in the corner so you can sign up for Leland and receive some more free resources like this panel that we're doing right now. So just another recap of the schedule. What we're doing today is, like, you guys already had the dental school overview of the application, and now we're just going to do a nice and short Q&A panel. Tomorrow you're going to have the interview preparation, what to expect and how to succeed, and then a personal statement deep dive. And then on Thursday, the final day, you'll do some dental school application office hours, how you hear about how someone scored a 25 on the DAT, and figure out how to gain a competitive advantage when you're applying as a non-traditional applicant. Okay. So I'm Ruby. I graduated from the Harvard School of Dental Medicine in 2023. I went straight into dental school. So I graduated from UMass Amherst in 2019 and went right to dental school. Um, since graduation, I have been practicing as a general dentist in a private practice. It's been amazing. I can't believe that it's almost been 2 years since I graduated. Time really does fly. But I remember being in your guys' shoes and really wishing that I had coaches and people that I could lean on in a more official setting. And that's kind of why I decided to get into coaching myself. I did used to work at DAT boot camp as well before dental school started. So that gave me a lot of inside scoop on how to prepare for not just dental school, but also specifically the dental admissions exam. And with that, we will go into the Q&A. So if everyone can just try to send questions in the chat, I'm going to attempt at reading through the questions and trying to answer the most popular ones. One thing I want to remind everyone of is that please try to ask more wide-ranging questions that will be helpful to more people. If you have a very specific question that really only pertains to you, I'm probably not going to be able to answer it just given the fact that we have a limited amount of time here. Okay, so would a mistake in one application cycle impact another application cycle? So this is a good question, especially because as dental school becomes more and more competitive, I'm sure there are people in this chat that are reapplicants and people who may unfortunately be reapplicants in the future. Um, I would say it really depends when it comes to talking about a mistake in your application. Um, if your mistake, say, was that you had too little of a certain type of activity or volunteering or whatever, and then in the second application you change that, then of course, like, that would not, the first problem would not affect you. But say that your mistake in your first application was that you submitted your application really late and therefore kind of put yourself behind um, in terms of getting interviews from schools, and you did that again, like, the school may notice that and be like, okay, this person kind of has consistently sent in their application late twice now. So that's an example where, yes, it probably would affect you. But overall, I would say for the most part, if you're applying a second time, um, the application is looked at with a fresh set of eyes. How important is additional manual dexterity skills if one is already a dental assistant? So I think this is a great question too. I know that a lot of you probably have your own experiences that you're getting in dental offices already. And I think that this kind of just also answers similar questions. If you already have a lot of manual dexterity skills through your job or say through work that you already do, like in a research lab, like really fine-tuned work with your hands, no, you don't need to be trying to get a bunch of unique manual dexterity experience. Um, that whole part of the application and all dental schools are looking for is that you do have an interest with working with your hands. So it's not like you have to have a very specific thing that you're doing just for your dexterity skills. Obviously, if they ask you something and you can like casually say you like to do maybe, you know, drawing or something like that, then that would help too, but not something you need super hardcore on your application. Does the number of dentists you shadow matter? How many dentists do you recommend shadowing? And does it matter if you shadow specialists or should we only shadow general dentists? So, what I would say is definitely what's most important is shadowing general dentistry. Um, I would say try to get at least two people in there that you've shadowed. But no, you definitely don't need a long laundry list of people that you've shadowed. For example, when I applied, I only had two people in my application that I had truly shadowed and I knew could vouch for it. And they were both general dentists. I think the focus that you really want to remember is that you're trying to become a general dentist. So the focus is not to be a specialist. So if you have to choose, then definitely choose shadowing in general dentistry over a specialty because you're not going to get a real picture of what the career looks like at a base if you're only shadowing in specialties. The best strategy to prepare for the DAT. So you guys are gonna definitely discuss this more over the next couple days. But as my personal take on the DAT and also through students that I've been working with over the last couple years, stick with DAT boot camp. And like I don't work for them anymore. This isn't sponsored or anything, but DAT boot camp, they know what they're doing. Their system for writing the test questions and everything is very accurate. How you're doing on boot camp is usually pretty reflective of how you're going to do on the real exam. So I think it's a really great way to prepare yourself. And then also, boot camp is actually what a lot of students use to study for the board exam once they are in dental school as well. So it just kind of shows that boot camp really has a commitment to working with students throughout, all the different steps that they're in. So overall, I think get boot camp, do their 3-month strategy or whatever, and you can edit it accordingly. And then the one biggest piece of advice I would give is always go over and review your practice exams, not just like a quick scroll over. I mean, like rewrite every question and every explanation of every question on a practice exam that you did, even if it's full length, so that you can essentially double study the content that you already answered questions to. I have low shadowing hours. Would it look bad if I try to get them up in the next 4 months? No, not at all. It is not uncommon for people to do a bulk of their shadowing at one time, for example, through the summer, or something like that. So no, that is not a bad thing. Would it be all right to write the dental personal statement on a career other than general dentist? I would say no. I would not do that, especially because, like I kind of mentioned earlier, you're applying to be like a dental student in a school that's going to prepare you to become a general dentist. So you really want to make sure that you're casting a wide net, even in your personal statement. You may have your own personal goals or achievements that you're going for, but it's not smart to kind of show that in this early on in your dental school journey. So I would steer clear of focusing on one particular specialty in your personal statement. So international student applications. I myself was an international student. I still technically am. I'm Canadian. I think the most important thing when it comes to international students is making sure you apply early, making sure you apply to schools that are actually international friendly. So by that, what I mean is even if it says on their website that they are, that you look at like the ADA guide that you can buy or get online, and see if they actually have a history of accepting said students. So, for example, being Canadian, I had kind of a Excel sheet that I made where I specifically had schools that said they took Canadians and then schools that actually took Canadians. And then I kind of narrowed down where I applied from there because unfortunately there are some schools that are very strict and they won't look at you if you're international. And then beyond that, I think, it's always most important to aim a little bit higher, as best as you can with both your DATs, your GPA, and then just your general involvement. The odds are definitely stacked against you as an international student. So I would say that's very important as well. Okay, advice if an applicant has a lower GPA, definitely just try to make it up for on the DAT. So for example, if you have a low GPA specifically because or just as part of a reason is a chemistry class that you took, a general chemistry class that you didn't do well on. A good way to rebound yourself or show that you've improved a lot could be to do really well in the Gen Chem section on the DAT. So I would say trying to make it up from the DAT is good, getting an above average score for a lower than average GPA. And then, of course, just staying well rounded and as involved as you can to kind of show that, okay, yeah, like school's important and you do your best in school, but you're also a well rounded applicant. Just reading more questions. What is the most ideal time to take the DAT? This is a very, very good question. I have always told students that I coach, and just in general, this is what I employed too. If you are able, say you want to go straight to dental school, try to take your DAT no later than February of your junior year. So essentially, a year and a half ish before you would be applying. The reason for that is the applications become available in May. You ideally want to submit them in early June. So now, like this person mentioned, the DAT takes some time for the scores to come back, but also in general, even if in the past it didn't take time for the scores to come out, you still were waiting for your score to become official. So overall, from the time you take your DAT, I would budget for at least a month before schools are able to actually officially see your scores. So as a result, if you're thinking kind of worst case scenario, or the best way to get you into dental school, you want to make sure you're confident in your DAT score before you apply. So if you are applying in June, you don't want to be taking your DAT in May so that, say, God forbid, you don't do well on it, then you're kind of scrambling and trying to retake it before applying early and all that stuff. But if you take it in that February timeframe, you still have more than enough time to get your score back, potentially do a retake if you need to, and still end up applying early. So that's kind of the best piece of advice I can give for that. Obviously, if you do have to take it later or it only works to take it later, another thing I want to remind people of is that even though schools may say it doesn't matter if you take your DAT multiple times, schools generally do look at your highest score, but they are able to see all of your scores if they want to. So just always be mindful of that. Take the test as seriously as you can. Like don't be taking the DAT just for practice. Okay. Yeah, so a question, showing if your DAT score shows improvement, then schools have no problem with that. That's great. So this question, how feasible do you think it is to be able to enter dental school right after graduating with your bachelor's? And what are the steps you should take to do that while completing school? So I think this is a great question. I think the advice here is really just have your game plan set as early as you can. And by that, what I mean is making sure that you have all your prereqs kind of planned and ready to go within your overall graduation timeline. So, for example, even though I was a biochemistry major, there was anatomy and physiology that I really wanted to take because that opened up the opportunity for me to apply to certain dental schools. but anatomy and phys was not a part of my curriculum for my major. So I decided dental school a little bit later, like it was right before junior year. So I was kind of scrambling to fit in anatomy and phys on top of my upper level biochemistry, like labs and classes. So it just was a little more difficult. With that being said, you can absolutely still do it. It's just a little bit more of a grind. And I think that's kind of the overall theme of if you do want to go straight through, as long as you're on top of your planning, of your timelines, you should be totally fine. Give yourself the grace of being able to take your DAT early if you're able to as well, because like I mentioned earlier, if you need to retake, you have the time to do it. And then in general, I do think it's great to be able to go straight through if you're able, just because it saves a lot of time on the back end as well. Okay. Is it advised to seek out many types of volunteering experience or have a lot of time in one experience? For example, volunteering at a hospital, then a soup kitchen, or simply staying a while at both? This is a great question, I think, and I think it really depends on you. So, if you're someone who generally likes to be involved in a lot of different things and you're able to speak about each of those things pretty passionately and you enjoy volunteering in all of those things, I would do that. But if you're more passionate about one particular organization that you work with and you want to devote more time to them, that also looks great. Those 2 things are showing different perspectives, like, both are showing that you're very committed to community service and giving back, but at the same time, one is showing that you're pretty diverse and you kind of want to apply yourself to a lot of different things, help as much as you can in different ways, and one is showing just a very high level of commitment as well. So you can't really go wrong with either. For the activity section, should you write descriptions of what you did or stories of the activity? So this is a great question. I think this is something that stumps a lot of people, including clients that I work with as well. For the activities descriptions, what you want to say is one sentence explaining what you did in that activity, one sentence or two sentences explaining what you learned and what that activity, afforded you, or like what you gained as a student because of that activity. So, for example, if you wrote that you were in Big Brothers Big Sisters, that was something I did. So, I wrote what Big Brothers Big Sisters was, what I did specifically as a member of that organization. So, second sentence, and then the third one was, and through that, I was able to learn how to be very like compassionate to different members of society, something like that, So always kind of give that takeaway piece for the person reading it. Is a 4-year degree required at all dental schools? Yes, it is. Is July or August too late to apply in this cycle if I want to study for the DAT April to July? This really depends on you and kind of the strength of the remainder of your application. In my opinion, any application after the middle of July is considered pretty late. And that's kind of when we get into the category of, I'm telling students to only apply to a handful of schools and not kind of waste their money if they're able. But, I also do have some students who had personal things go on. They ended up applying late August and they have received interviews as well. So I think it just depends on you and what your situation is. But I think the biggest thing is if you do apply later, remember that your entire season and cycle will also be later. So you probably won't be getting interviews until like December, January. How important is dental experience to your application? Is it a requirement or a suggestion? Will shadowing suffice? This is a great question. So, as an international student living in the US, I was not able to get any sort of like dental assisting job or be a hygienist or anything like that. So this was something I personally was very nervous for in my application as well. And the answer is that shadowing will absolutely suffice. If you're not able to get like a paid job or a direct hands-on way of working in this, dental field, schools understand that. They know that it's difficult to get positions like that. So if you kind of counteract that with a lot of shadowing hours, you would have no problem. And that's exactly what I did. Okay. What traits do competitive schools like Harvard look for in applicants? Leadership, service, research. So I would say the most competitive schools, one of the biggest things they do look for is high statistics. It's you can't really get around that. So, having a high DAT, a high GPA, and a lot of involvement is helpful. Leadership is definitely a really big quality. So highlighting ways you've been a leader, maybe not in like direct ways. So for example, you don't have to be the president of something, but for being in Big Brothers Big Sisters, like I described earlier, you're serving as a leader and a mentor to a student or your mentee. So that kind of example also shows leadership. So you can get a little bit creative with how you show these qualities in your activity sections. Um, but for sure, leadership. And then when it comes to research, that is not as important as people think. If you're very passionate about research, absolutely, it's great. It's gonna help your application. I, for one, was not. I had very limited research experience. Definitely nothing I could speak for, nothing I was like published in. I did volunteer in a research lab for a semester, but like that was it. So my research exposure was very, very limited, and I don't think that negatively affected my application at all. Okay, we're getting near the end of the Q&A session, so I'm just gonna try to go through and pick the last couple of questions. Mm, Does dental school accept virtual volunteering also? Um, I know that some dental schools were making exceptions for virtual shadowing and volunteering hours during COVID. I would definitely double check this though, depending on the schools that you plan to apply to, because ever since, COVID has kind of passed us, that those exceptions aren't really there anymore. So I would just double check with the schools that you're applying to. Would it be favorable to include an extracurricular activity that you may have started in high school and that led into university? Absolutely. Again, shows a lot of commitment. This is a great question. So, what if you didn't receive any awards and the award section is blank on your application? And then this same person was able to follow up and say, would receiving active membership from a pre-dental society, for example, count? Absolutely. So the award section, by it does not have to have anything in it, but you can also show any and all awards that you have. So, for example, when I was graduating high school, I actually was the recipient of an award that was based on, my character. So, in the awards section, even though it was from high school, I wrote that I had been a recipient for that because it shows things that you've been appreciated for in the past. Again, you can get creative here, and this is where sometimes having a coach can be really helpful to see what things you can get creative about. So just like this person said, writing that you were invited to be a member of the pre-dental society, you can absolutely make that into an award or something, where you've been highlighted. Being a part of the dean's list at your school, that can be another award, things like that. Schools usually have a 100-hour minimum for volunteer hours. Should we have 100 dental clinic hours or 100 community service hours? You should have 100 of each. So make sure you have 100 shadowing hours and then at least 100 service hours. Okay, I'm trying to just choose the last question and make it as good of one as I can. Mm, Okay, this I think is a very good question. So this person is working on their post-bac. They never made or were able to make connections with professors, and they're trying to figure out how to get letters of recommendation. And then same thing for their pre-health committee letter. So this is something that happens so often, especially when you're at really big schools. It can be extremely difficult to make connections with your professors. This is another place where if you're really early on in the dental application cycle, so say you're like a freshman or a sophomore and you're planning to apply to dental school in the future, you can start thinking even now what people you will want for each category. So you want at least 2 to 3 science professors. So say you have one science professor that you're really close with, and you have XYZ science classes coming up. If you need those letters of recommendation, I would try to maybe get closer with one of those faculty during the class that you may take in the future. So, like go to office hours when you can. And when all of that fails, or if you have a professor that you've had in the past and you're now trying to get a letter of recommendation from them, but really you had no relationship with them, my advice is always, always, always honesty is the best policy. If you send a letter or an email to them directly telling them your situation, stating all of the things that you appreciated about their class, that you learned from their class, and why you want them to be someone that would write your letter about recommendation. Usually people are pretty responsive to it. Faculty and professors have been through this, so they know that, it's kind of a tough position to be in. And another great thing I think that you can offer, and students of mine have offered in the past, is directly telling them that you are willing to meet with them. Even if that means setting up like a quick 10-minute weekly meeting with them for a couple of weeks so they get to know you before writing your letter of recommendation. Or if you're about to enter into the class, saying, okay, I'm going to come to your office hours once a week so we can go over material and all that kind of stuff and just get to know you, then, that's a great way to do it too. So don't be afraid of being honest with the people that you've had in the past and the situation at hand, because that's really the best you can do. And I really think people appreciate honesty more than, just trying to make up some excuse of why you're asking someone to write a letter of rec that maybe you didn't have a great relationship with. Okay, so with that, I am going to signal the end of this Q&A session. It was great talking with you guys. I wish we had more time to go over everyone's questions, but feel free to set up an intro call with me through Leland if you're interested. I definitely do a little bit more limited coaching now because I am working full time, but I'm I work a lot with all of the other dental coaches at Leland, and all of them are so great. So if you have any questions, make sure to reach out, and it was great chatting with all of you.